Residents of our region are familiar with what nature can do, but there are many other events that can alter life as we know it, from chemical spills to terrorist attacks. As storms in the Gulf Coast start to act up, we ask, are the members of your family ready should disasters strike? From emergency kits to escape routes, we'll share information and plans to ensure your best chance of surviving one of these events. I'm Ernie Manous, and this is Houston 8.
The Houston region is home to more than 6 million people, with the majority living about 40 feet above sea level in a major hurricane landing zone. Since 1851, 60 hurricanes have struck the Texas Gulf Coast, 19 of them a Category 3 or higher. And the Galveston hurricane of 1900 still ranks as the deadliest storm in U.S. history, killing more than 8,000 people. Even when the hurricane season misses us, we run the risk of being engulfed by violent storms, tornadoes, or devastating flooding. No one who lived here in 2001 is likely to forget Tropical Storm Allison, which ranks as the 10th costliest storm in U.S. history, causing more than $5 billion worth of damage to the Houston region. Our disaster threats don't stop with destructive weather. Houston is known as the energy capital of the world, a great honor, but one that makes us vulnerable to chemical spills, plant explosions, and other industrial accidents. Vast numbers of pipelines extend in all directions of the region, carrying flammable fluids under our neighborhoods. And hazardous cargo barrels down our freeways every day, around the clock. In addition, more than 50 million passengers are served by our 3 airport system every year. And we run one of the nation's busiest international shipping ports. Our major corporations produce trillions of dollars in annual sales. We are one of the nation's largest centers for world trade. Our size and concentration of industry makes us a prime target for terrorist attacks, just like any other major U.S. city.
Joining us tonight are Mark Sloan, Emergency Management Coordinator for the Harris County Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, Frank Billingsley, Chief Meteorologist, KPRC, and Judge Ed Emmett, top elected official for Harris County. Welcome to all of you gentlemen for being here. We open with that package to show it's more than just hurricanes that we're worried about in this area, but hurricanes, storms, all of that flooding are major concerns for us here.
And always will be. That's why, I mean, it's ongoing. I don't think there's any stop to it. And if you look at the population, your piece said 6 million people here. We're projected to go another 2.5 million people by 2030. So I mean, we're adding, 125,000 people a year to our 10-county metropolitan area. So,
which is a great point that you bring. I'm jumping right in here to say to the judge, so when you guys sit down to look at this plan, when you're going to put all this together, are you taking into consideration this huge growth we've got coming?
Oh, absolutely. And as Frank pointed out, we're also taking into consideration that it's a region. These events don't stop at a county line. They don't stop at city limits. And so we have to work with all the cities in the region, all the surrounding counties, to make sure that whatever our response is coordinated.
Now, Mark, there is a big plan out there that involves 3 steps that we'll be going through as we talk today about make a plan, build a kit, and stay informed. Putting this together, how much are you looking at everything that we had trouble with in the past? Because there were areas, I mean, considering everything, we did very well in this region, but there are areas that we could be improving on. How much of that is looked at in developing this?
We're constantly looking at the actions that we're taking during a disaster and improving on those every time. They're not everyday emergencies, and we get to practice those on a daily basis. But disasters come sometimes once in a lifetime, and you have to review those, adapt to them, and continue to improve our plans.
I would guess more than likely the most probable situation for us is something from the weather. Is that what we're pretty much assuming at this point? So everyone at home is wondering, we're going to go to you, Frank. How is it looking for our September?
Well, we always say it's only one. This season has had trouble getting started. There's a huge amount of dry air over the Atlantic because of the Sahara Desert. It puts all this dry air into the Atlantic. So that's really put a clamp on the Atlantic season really getting started. We've had I don't want to say fronts coming through, but we do have these fronts that are going to the East Coast, and those tend to be a nice barrier for us. As storms come across the Atlantic, they tend to shunt them north, just like Bill and just like we expect Danny to continue to do. So that's some help. On the other hand, Alicia formed on an old cold front. Yeah. And Claudette, just a couple of weeks ago, formed just south of Florida on an old cold front. And just like every disaster is different, every storm, every weather situation is different, whether it's just a meager tropical storm Allison or a huge Ike or something in between. So these gentlemen know that we have to be prepared for anything. I'm prepared to talk about whatever's coming our way and to help forecast it. They have to take the reins and say, how are we going to handle this one versus that one?
Not being as wise in all of this as you are, I think to myself, and I could be way off, and I probably am, the tension building. If we don't have a storm, is it like a rubber band, that it's pulling, and when a storm hits, it hits harder?
No.
Or is there nothing to that? It's just whatever could happen.
Water temperature, there's a strong El Nino in the Pacific. That warmer water means warmer air and wind that helps knock the tops off of developing storms. There's the Saharan air layer that I talked about. The Atlantic's been a little cooler. There are a lot of factors that play in every season. I mean, you can get a 2005 where you have 5 Category 5 hurricanes, and then you can get the season right after in 2006. I bet nobody even remembers it. Right. So no, it's not like a spring that suddenly goes.
So even though we don't know what's coming in the weather, because as you've said before, even on this show, that even a single storm popping up could be horrible for us, depending on how it hits and what speed.
One single storm will ruin and change your life. I mean, it will alter your life and your community.
So we need to know, how are we prepared? What are we going to do for this? And this plan is out here, and it's talking about both natural and man-made disasters. Right. No matter what the disaster is, following the steps that we're going to go through will benefit you.
Oh, absolutely, and Mark can certainly talk about what individuals should do, but from a governmental point of view, everybody remembers evacuations. They've gotten better each time. One of the concerns I have is about a storm that may pop up and hit land in 24 hours, only be a Category 1 or 2, but because nobody had time to get out of the way, it has a bigger impact than the size of the storm.
I think when you also talk about evacuation, people's first thoughts are cars just sitting on highways. How has that changed, and is it better to stay in place or be stuck sitting in your car on a highway?
Well, it depends. If you're in danger of a storm surge, you have to get out of the way. You have to evacuate. We encourage everybody else to stay put, or that famous phrase that now been used, hunker down, and then leave after the storm passes if you want to, if you don't have power. But if you just compare the Ike evacuation to Rita, the improvements that were made between those two storms in terms of evacuation routes, in terms of instructions to people, we now have contraflow that can be used. And Ike even taught us some lessons in the area around Conroe, for example, where traffic really jammed up even during Ike. There are now ways to get around Conroe that we will implement. So there have been improvements, and that's what Mark and his office do all the time. They look, as he said, what did we do right, what did we do wrong, and try and make corrections.
So Mark, what did we do right, what did we do wrong?
Well, there's a variety of things that obviously we did very well. Being able to adapt our plans. You can write all the great plans that you want, but when the impact actually takes place, you're going to have to adapt. And we adapted in numerous ways, including how to distribute food, water, and ice. And the residents of the community came together to make sure that we could do that. And we learned lessons from that so that we could put better plans in place for the next storm that occurs. Coordination between our jurisdictions and communications are always an issue. How do we continue to enhance our communication to our partners on a more timely basis? Because you're dealing with a high-speed incident that's going to take place, and there's a lot of energy that's going on, and you don't sleep as much as you'd like to, and it's trying to make sure that we're communicating on a regular basis. So there's a lot of areas that we look at to improve.
And even though we are picking apart what's happened in the past, as we said a moment ago, that we were very successful in this region in what we did. But you got to realize that any single person out there who didn't get food, didn't get water, didn't have power are going to think, the whole thing was a disaster. Oh, no pun intended. So when you look at it, though, how are you gauging your success in this area? How do you decide what is acceptable number of people that didn't get food in time or didn't have water? How do you calculate these things?
Well, our goal is always to make sure that we can get our message and communicate with the public in a timely fashion so that we can accommodate the best way possible to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people as effectively and efficiently as possible. And sometimes people aren't going to get the message, and we try to look at new ways to reach out to those populations. If they don't have power, is it distributing flyers and going door to door? And there's always ways to improve and look at those ways to get out there to the public.
Okay, on the web, if you go to readyhoustontex.gov, there is a 3-part plan that takes this apart one by one, each of these parts, but there's also a video you can watch, which we saw a little of at the very top there, that kind of helps people get ready and prepared for this. And I want to go into it in detail so that folks at home can start to prep for this, because the first step even is make a plan. And so you want everyone on top of this now, before anything hits, because time is of the essence, correct?
Correct.
Absolutely.
And the more personal responsibility we take, the easier it's going to be on emergency managers.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be responsible for every single hair on everybody's head. People have to come forth and look at these videos and take these lists seriously and be prepared. I've spoken to lots of groups, as you have. I don't know that one person has said, I have my water ready.
Right.
I'm ready to go. I've read the list. I've got my prescription medicines. I've got extra Pampers. I know what I'm going to do with my dog. I know how I'm going to get out of here. No, everyone says, don't let that happen again.
Right.
Nobody says, I'm ready for the next one. So, and I don't want to beat anybody over the head, but we have to take personal responsibility and that's why we have these websites and have these lists, so people will really take heed.
I'm going to start with make a plan. And the first thing is that I thought everyone should think about, but you forget about account for everyone in the family and designate a meeting place, be it a neighbor's, and actually I guess according to your plan it should be in 2 places. One should be a local close by place that the family can meet, and another should be out of town. Explain.
Well, it's important that people understand, based on the type of event that we're about to face. Our kids could be at school, mom could be at home, dad's at work, and the event occurs. Are we going to meet in a neighborhood? Is it safe to go back to our own homes? Or do we need to meet at our relatives? And it might be in Cy-Fair or Conroe, Dallas, San Antonio, or Austin. But it's understanding the type of event that we're about to face and that the family has a plan to reunite. And that's part of putting that together.
I would assume if it is a weather-related incident, going inland is better. But if it is chemical or some kind of attack of some sort, is there a suggestion of where to go to meet? What is a better plan? Is it inland? Is it out of state? Is it north, south? What do you folks recommend?
What we recommend is that you understand the threats that exist within your neighborhood and your community. If you understand those and you understand the warning systems that exist and listen to the local elected officials, your first responders, based on the type of event that occurs, if it's a chemical related, you want to make sure that you don't put yourself at risk and go into the plume that might exist. If they tell you that you need to shelter in place, you can do those things. And not necessarily go to the school to pick up your children because you're putting them at risk. So based on the event, understanding the risks and the threats that are in your community will make you better prepared and not become a statistic to the event.
One of the best points in the plan that I saw was that realize schools have disaster response plans. Right. So if your kids are at school, they are probably being taken care of by the school system.
Absolutely, and I can give you a personal example. We lived in Round Rock back in the 1980s, and a tornado came through. The elementary school where 2 of our children were had a plan, take them to a high school, shelter there, and then they had a phone tree, if you will, to notify all the parents as to where the children were and what time they could come get them. Clearly the schools should have those kind of plans, and I assume that they do. But what Mark said about realizing where you live, if you live near the ship channel, you're facing potentials that you don't face if you live in Katy or Bel Air, for example. Mm-hmm. And all families need to understand where they live and what the dangers they face are.
There are 2 points on the plan that I think kind of work against each other. One point is phones and cell phones might not be working. And the second point is make a list of all important phone numbers. Seems like contradictory, but you need to know both of these things. You need to have the list of what numbers should you have and readily available, and not saved either in your cell phone or on your computer, but actually have it somewhere concrete. I'll let Mark talk about that.
Well, it's important that you have your doctor's phone numbers and your school phone numbers and your co-workers, your family members, and have those numbers readily available in your own Rolodex, so to speak, that you take with you. Once you leave the area, you might have cell service. As we found during Katrina, cell service was knocked out in New Orleans, but once the residents of New Orleans arrived here, they had cell service again. And they were looking for their doctor's phone numbers, and they didn't have them. And it's just a reminder to put a list together of important phone numbers that you're going to need in order to let people know that you're okay.
Now, Frank, I know you spent a lot of time down in Galveston, especially after the storm. And this, I think, is very interesting. Just this plastic bag to put your documents in.
Sure.
If people had had these, how different would things have been for a lot of folks?
Well, you know, your insurance documents are vital. But again, your insurance adjuster's phone number is important as well. But anything you have, you really should just make copies of your marriage certificate or your birth certificate, your social security number, whatever documents you have in that regard, the deed to your house, just to get back on the island. Some people needed to prove that they were a resident and that they had a home there. So you just may need that proof. But all of those important papers, make copies of them and make sure you have them safeguarded. If you don't make copies and put them, say, in an office or with a relative somewhere else.
See,
just like taking
pictures
of things and sending those pictures, especially with computers now. You can take pictures of your whole house and either take that little thumb drive or just email the pictures to a relative and they've got them.
Right. Make a packet of vital documents and video of home belongings, store out-of-town contact. So send it away because if disaster strikes here, and as you said, with computer, make multiple copies. Send them to multiple places. Make sure other people have it because especially with insurance, it helps greatly when you're doing your claims.
And texting worked, by the way. You were on the phone issue. Texting seems to work. It doesn't require as much power as an actual phone call.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we found that out during Katrina. People were able to text that weren't able to actually cell phone.
First priority, of course, is our family. Here's something that I was not aware of, and maybe it's because of my age and my life, but you can register with 211 if you have someone in your family. Judge, if you can talk about that.
Not just if you have someone in your family. If for whatever reason you or someone you know cannot evacuate themselves, all they have to do is dial 211 and register.
And they should do that ahead of time.
Do that now. Do that as soon as you finish watching this program.
So like 411 or 911, just dial 211.
Dial 211, and it doesn't have to be, it may be illness, it may be that just because of age or infirmity, or it may be just that you don't have means of transportation. Whatever the reason, dial 211 and they'll put you on the registry.
And then they know to come look for you in case of disaster.
Correct. And it doesn't just apply to those people who are in the storm surge areas. We're talking about other types of disasters. You can be in any part of the county, and if a disaster occurs, you might need to be evacuated. So dial 211.
And who shouldn't dial 211? Are there people that should, if you're capable, if you've got transportation,
right?
If
you can evacuate yourself, you don't need to clog up the 211 system. But it's also important that if you know someone, then talk to them and get them registered, because a lot of people who might need transportation won't necessarily take the initiative to register themselves. So if you have a relative or a friend or a neighbor, work with them and get them registered.
And remember, all this information is at readyhoustontechs.gov. And we're putting that up on the screen.
It's state funded, right? So, I mean, and the money for it's divvied out by how many people have registered. So we need all the people that need it registered so that we know we have the money for those people to be
Great
evacuated
point.
and taken care of. So it's not one of those freebies that you just dial 211 when you feel like it. You really need to get registered. It's very important.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that is the Make Plan. More details, more information about that is at that website that I mentioned. Next thing up, build a kit. And Frank, you've talked about this many times, and my favorite thing you've said, a gallon of water per person per day. Keep that in mind as just what you're going to need.
For at least a week.
For at least a week.
I mean, water for a week, food for 3 days. But you really need water for so many other things than just drinking. You need something to help, maybe bathe yourself, get the toilets to flush. And remember, that was a big issue. If nothing else, after Ike, the water contamination and the levels of pressure were a real issue.
And with a storm coming, fill bathtubs with water, fill things up.
I think that's smart. And if you fly to Houston, you see a lot of swimming pools. So there's a lot of there's a lot of water there that can be used for different things. But that can be dangerous too if it becomes contaminated by other floodwaters. So, but that's a good rule.
One thing that I thought was very clever that they put in this too is to remember a can opener. Sure, you get the non-perishable foods, but pack a manual can opener in that you can get them for $1 or something. Make sure you have that because it do you no good if you've got all this canned food and can't get to it. Medication, toiletries, sunscreen, bug repellent, radios, flashlights, batteries, clothing. Anything to add to it?
So somebody added to my list a viewer that was very clever. These solar-powered outdoor lights. Mm-hmm. If you put those outside during the day and they get all solar powered, then at night you at least have some light in your home if you don't have electricity. I thought it was very clever.
It was. I remember them bringing that up.
Yeah.
Build a kit for every member of your family. Make sure that everyone has that. And here's one I hadn't thought of either, a pet kit also. If you have pets, they need water, food. They need their immunization documentation, a cat or dog carry case. You need that a recent photo should the animal get lost or separated from you in the shelters and helps you, something I'd never even thought about.
And you put the microchip in your animal too.
Right.
That really helps reunite. And a lot of people found out when they wanted that your dog outgrows the kennel that you probably had as a puppy. But then when you need to get that dog on a bus or public transportation, you need the kennel.
Right.
So even if your dog doesn't normally use one, if you are in a position where you think you may have to transport your dog, you may need that kennel.
Judge, as far as our city goes, when our county goes and we're being evacuated, what is the plan for bringing our pets? Are we allowed to?
You are allowed to bring your pets, and of course, if you're evacuating yourself in your own vehicle, of course you are.
Right.
We do encourage, what we saw during Rita, too many people were trying to take too many vehicles with them. Just take the minimum number and get on the road. But you do have to have a carrying case for your pet. Now, you do have to have a leash, for example. If you stop by the side of the road, you don't want to just let the pet out. But on the evacuation that's provided by the state, that was one of the big issues. Thinking back to Katrina, people were told they couldn't bring their pets. You can bring your pets now, and that's important to realize.
But you have to have a case.
You have to have a case.
They also have a portable kit in case you have to flee that has bare necessities in it. I'm assuming you're not bringing a gallon of water per day per person in your portable kit, but things like the sunscreen and the bug repellent are going to come in handy, especially if you're outside for any period of time. Also things on here, which always surprises me, and maybe somebody can explain this one to me, the plastic and the duct tape to make your home airtight. If you're making your home airtight, you're not going to last in there very long. What is the logic behind this?
Duct tape and plastic, and after 9/11 and the petrochemical scare that people went through, was lack of information and understanding. If there's a petrochemical release and it's a short durational period and you're told to shelter in place, what you're doing is going into a safe room in your house. It might be an interior bathroom. And you're using duct tape and plastic to reduce airflow from the outside into that safe room. And if you have a portable radio, you'll hear when it's all clear. It's only for a short durational period. You're only talking maybe an hour while the air or the plume, the petrochemical plume, passes your home. And then you'll be told to come outside and get fresh air and ventilate your own home.
Okay, so it's not you're sealing up all the windows, all the doors, and you're going to be in these bubbles.
No.
Again, all this information, as I keep saying, is at readyhoustontext.gov so that they can go there and hear all this. Before we run out of time, then the last point on this is stay informed. And I have to say that was a wonderful thing that we went through with Ike, was that we were able to, when the TV went out, we could still follow you, Frank, on the radio. And everyone is suggested to go to KTRH 740. That is our local official response area.
That's the EAS. That's the Emergency Alert System. And all of the broadcast networks pick up that information based on the alerts that come out from the National Weather Service and other providers through Homeland Security or whatever may be occurring.
Evacuation is difficult. Do not make assumptions or take unplanned actions. If you are told not to evacuate, you don't have to evacuate.
Absolutely.
And you probably shouldn't, because you're going to congest the areas where people need to evacuate.
As we said repeatedly, in a hurricane scenario, Galveston Island has to clear first. We have to let people off the island. And then the low-lying areas have to clear before anybody else gets on the highway. One of the, bad features of Ike that's come back to haunt us, people are now coming up to me saying, I'm not going to stay if I don't have power. Fine, but wait till the storm passes. Yeah, make sure your home's secure. If a hurricane hits and it knocks out power to your home, secure your home and then leave, because after the storm's gone, evacuation's not that difficult. But in advance of the storm, we absolutely have to let those people who are in danger of the storm surge get through our area first.
Gentlemen, we are out of time. The one thing I want to stress again, though, if you need help evacuating, right now go to the phone, dial 211 and register now. Get it done. Also, you can get all this information online and at our website, which I'm going to tell you about right now, because each week we invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Simply click on the local program bar, pick Houston 8, and then you can join our online community. Read about our guests, learn more about the topic, share your thoughts and ideas, and even suggest questions that we might ask during upcoming episodes. Remember, information posted on our website may be used on air, so keep that in mind when submitting. That does it for us tonight. Until next time, I'm Ernie Manous. Have a great week. Thank you.